Right, here we are again at Sacred Space, Titania's realm. It's the 6th of July 2025 and the time is currently 1:56 p.m. I've had the birdie boys out in the garden with me, but the weather's sort of clouded over and it's got this intense sullen kind of humidity, which is weird. Temperature's 23 degrees, so it's a bit warmer today than it has been. And but there's kind of this oppression. So I think we're going to get, we may, I don't know. I think we're going to get some rain or some kind of storm. It's not predicted, but I thought I'll just bring them in. Didn't feel good being out there. Somehow it felt like the weather was on the turn. So, my sweet little wild lorikeets are out there looking for food, but I didn't put any out today. I was looking rather disappointed, but I don't want to feed them every day because then they'll be dependent and it's not good for them. It's flown off in disgust. Let me nose on a bow over the umbrella, looking back at me as to say, "Where's my food, Mama T? I know, boys, but I can't have you being codependent. You're wild and you need to survive in the wild." Oh, but they are lovely. My mother instinct just wants to go out and rush food out to them. But each bag of that food is $40 and I'm only using it up because it's left. It was a brand new one left over from Charlie. We'd only just started on it when she passed away. So I want to give it to them, but then I don't want them dependent on it because it'll be a habit I'll have to keep doing. $40 a bag. Plus the $42 it costs for Kermie and Bo's food, that's $80. Starts mounting up, doesn't it? I don't begrudge it if I can easily afford it. I've got to be realistic. The idea was just to use up the stuff we had, not to get them dependent on, me providing them food every day. So yes, they can have a break for today. Oh, but they're turning their head and looking at me. I'm being eyed out. I'm being stared at. If we stare at her just a little bit longer, she'll feed us. They know me too well. I'm so easy when it comes to animals and birds. I'm an easy touch. But look, they are just so lovely. And they remember me. Even my new birds were quite astonished how they just flew down when they were just new here. They'd only been here about a week. And they came down and they sat on top of the washing line on the Hills hoist and they peered down at me with happiness, and Kermie was like, they're acting like they're friends. He was very confused. I had to explain to him that, my other bird was a rainbow lorikeet and they're all friends. I've even got the turkey peering at me now. He flew up on top of the potting bench to let me know he wants his food too. Well, shall I weaken and give it to them? No. It's the right thing is to give them a day or two without, so they're not dependent. Right, it's not like they're starving. If they were starving, they would get it. They're fat little, happy little birds. Look at the Mama T. So right, today's story is titled Flotsam and Jetsom, which is how my life has felt most of the time. Seems to be, floating in reasonably shallow, clear, languid waters at the moment. Feeling quite content. I had a very weird dream this morning though, and for some reason vocal media wouldn't let me publish it, probably because I mentioned, Germans and Jews, and they're worried, the bots, not the people. There must be certain keywords that they think mean racism, but there was nothing racist in that whole story. I don't think it's racist saying that I don't align with genociders of any race, past or present. There's nothing racist about that. It's just saying what I'm not willing to tolerate and accept and align with, people of Earth. But anyway, they wouldn't publish it. It's very annoying. I'll read it to you while I'm here, while I'm in the mood to share my most intimate dreams with you, because it was the emotion behind the dream that made me write about it. Actually, it was a bit confronting. And I'm sure it's a repeat dream. I'm sure I've had it. In fact, I think I've dreamt it before earlier this year and probably written about it. I must go through my saved posts on Facebook, see if it's the same dream. Because if it is, I really will be sitting up and taking notice, people of Earth. But anyway, I'll read it to you if you wish to indulge me in it before we get stuck into my reading of Flotsam and Jetsom by Somerset Maugham. Alright, that needs to be moved to the bin because that's doubled up. I don't know why. Why the gods? Right, here we go. That's doubled up too. The new iPhone's got a very light touch, so when I'm sharing memories, it often posts 2 or 3 instead of just 1. So I have to be more conscious of that. Right. This is what I do with my time. When I'm not making YouTube videos, I go through my Facebook writings and retrieve them when they come up. They hold a lot back, trust me. There's a lot more that I don't see, doesn't see the light of day again unless I scramble into my archives, but they've made it harder and harder to get into my archives. So what I'm going to have to do is buy an external hard drive and retrieve everything somehow from the archives, put it all together, probably be a few TVs worth of writing, and just have it all in one place on my own hard drive, because local media won't publish some of my stuff, which has really pissed me off today, because I pay $15, sometimes up to $17 a month, depending on the American dollars exchange rate. I'm paying for what? For nothing. Won't even publish all my material. So anyway, I'm going to have to cobble it together, is what I'm saying, in one place, and then pick out, my more interesting writings that I deem to be of interest, which is hard because a lot of it's just weird spiritual ramblings, channelings, musings, meanderings. I don't know what people want to read, it's very difficult to decide. But anyway, I need to cobble it together, at least for no other reason, just to have it in one place, and then perhaps put it into a book and get it published, just so it's out there in the world for everyone to read, not just people who have access to my Facebook and vocal media. And who knows, at least I won't feel like a complete loser like I normally feel, go through life feeling, only because, horrible men that think they can demean me at public gigs has eaten away at my confidence and my soul a bit. But fuck that cunt, literally. He can fuck himself. But anyway, why am I angry today? I'm not really angry. It was just a stupid thing he did, and it's of no real importance. I'm moving on. Right, where was I? So this morning, it's kind of a nightmare, but it won't scare you, but it was kind of a bit scary for me. I'll read it to you now. All my little lorikeets, sweethearts, are really putting on a turn now. They're putting on a show because they want their food. Right, anyway, I might just give what's $40 extra a month? It's not like I'm spending it on grandchildren, am I? Anyway, never mind. 9:05 a.m. I just woke up. When I say just woke up, I mean I literally have just opened my eyes and I'm already writing on Facebook, which is pretty amazing actually when you think about it. How dead I feel most of the time. Zombie. I felt like hell today emotionally after sharing all those writings. There was a whole lot of memories that came up as well. I really felt like hell. I feel like, Why am I not allowed a true love, and why is life so fucking awful? So hence I sat out with the birds and tried to ground myself and remind myself that life should not always be awful, and things can change in any given moment in space-time continuum, and life and the birds are still beautiful, and there is still goodness out in the world, people of Earth. Sometimes you stumble across it. Anyway, here we go. I just woke up from an intense dream about staying in a seaside resort. Byron? It's my favourite place, so I always assume if I dream of seaside resorts that I'm in Byron. Oh, sad, isn't it? One of the greatest loves of my life, though, is that place. I was there with my friend Jared when some backpackers came up and asked if we could allow them to stay with us. I said it was okay, as it was a house with lots of rooms. We were all settling in fine when suddenly a huge influx of about 30 or 40 people arrived. One man hands me his passport. It was Danish. "You are German," he tells me, looking at me tensely. I seize up, standing to full hobbit height, 5'2" and shrinking. I used to be 5'3". Small as violin. On my last dignity, I am a New Zealander. Another man and woman, which is odd that I said that in a dream actually, because I'm actually an Australian citizen and I usually say I'm Australian. Then they look at me funny because of my New Zealand accent. But I've lived in Australia longer than I lived in my birth country, so I'm more Australian than New Zealander now. Anyway, where were we? Another man and woman standing in front of me with him look at me with genuine fear in their eyes. "You look German." I roll my eyes. I am half German. I am also a Jew. So what? I don't align with any fucking genociders of any race, past or present. What do you want? Why are you here? Snapping that out like a sergeant major of any self-respecting military genocider. I've spelt sergeant wrong. By the gods, just quickly fix that. Can't have sergeant spelt wrong. That's just embarrassing, people are there. Not that I've ever been in the military, you understand. They rejected me because I was too short. I did want to join the Navy at one stage. Probably just as well. I didn't make it there because me and sailors, you understand. It's an in-joke because I once told my psychiatrist about being out. We were at the Elephant and I met these 4 sailors. One of them was a woman, and we were chatting, and I said, "Oh, you're a Kiwi?" And I went, "Yeah, originally." "Oh, where are you from?" "Wellington." "Oh, we're from the New Zealand naval ship that's berthed up the river." I went, "Really?" Because they were all in their civilian clothes. I said, "Oh, you're pulling my leg. Pull the other one. It's got bells on." Anyway, somewhere, I don't know how, somewhere along the way, we were just stirring each other up, all 4 of us and me, bantering with each other, having a great time. It was near the end of the night. The band had finished. I think the band was packing up. And I was with my former friend Sarah, and she was probably trying to hook up with someone because that's what she did at the end of the night. She's younger than me, so I was okay with that. Not my monkey, not in the circus, you understand. Anyway, I had no intention of hooking up with anyone. I was just living my best life, dancing as I always do. Anyways, one thing led to another. I don't even know what happened, but I'll never forget that memory as long as I live, and my psyche still stirs me up about it from time to time, about me and the New Zealand naval petty officer. But anyway, all 4 of them, the woman sailor as well, lifted me up threw me up in the air. All four of them. And I'm flying through. I had a beautiful silk skirt, and all I could think of was, hope no one can see my knickers, because my skirt was billowing like a parachute as I'm falling down. They must have thrown me up quite high, because I had time to think, like, Jesus, can anyone see my knickers? And I hope they catch me. So I yell out, you better catch me, you bastards, because I've got a bad back, and if I land on the ground and snap my back, I will kill you. And they were laughing. So, how are you going to kill us with a snap back? I went, I'll find a fucking way. Anyway, this is all while I'm falling. And they were good sports, all four of them. One caught one ankle, one caught the other ankle, and the woman had my right arm, and Chief Petty Officer had my left arm, and they all caught me and put me back on my feet. And Sarah turned around and looked at me in shock and horror. Bear in mind at that time, I think it was it 2014? I think it was when I was 49. I had the best time in my 49th year. That was the best year. I had a wonderful birthday burst who I danced for at the Irish Murphys, wished me happy. The whole crowd wished me happy birthday, made me feel special, you know. It was lovely. I never forgot that. Anyway, so Sarah looks around and she just sees me just as I'm pirouetting. I wasn't pirouetting, but parachuting my silk skirt, just like because parachutes are made out of silk. People that work with me, and also, you know, I'm a big woman. It's like, oh, just sort of like a giant floating blancmange. Anyway, she looks at me like this and she goes, I don't believe it. I turned my back for 5 minutes and you're being thrown in the air. I said, they're hobbit tossing me just like a fucking hobbit. And then the Chief Petty Officer says to me, well, you are a hobbit, aren't you? I said, technically I am, short with big feet, but did you have to toss me like a fucking dwarf as well? Anyway, they all burst out laughing. We had a wonderful time. I went home with that one. But all he did was sleep. He slept and slept and slept and slept, and it got to like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I said, when are you going? Don't you have a ship to go back to? He says, oh my God, it's just so nice to sleep in someone's bed where it's quiet. He said, all I hear for a month is the sound of the engines all night long, rambling in my head. I understood because I was on a ship when I was 8 going to Germany. You could hear the thrum of the engines on sea deck because we were 3 levels below sea level. It was quite noisy, you know. I said, surely they've got better accommodation for their fighting men and women than that. He went, no, we're treated like animals. He said, our berths are tiny and we're all squeezed in and there's no room and it's noisy. It's awful. Anyway, and then I drove him back to his ship, and I thought he was lying to me the whole time, actually, you know, 'cause people lie, you know. So we're driving back at the port of Brisbane, and he says, oh my God. I said, what? He said, I forgot. Sometimes we move the ship across the river. We could be at the wrong port. I went, mate, you better get it right because I'm not driving all over Brisbane to find a fucking New Zealand naval ship. I said, why would they change berths? He says, oh, it sometimes depends on the tides or the weather or something. All that didn't ring true to me at all. Anyway, we get there and he was actually genuinely relieved that his ship was at the right berth waiting for us. What kind of a sailor are you? You don't even know where your ship's berthed. It's a bit odd. Anyway, I said, all right, on your bike, I'll never see you again. Thanks for the great night. He's like, thank you. And I said, you're going down in my memory forever as the man who, him and his friends, hobbit tossed me. And I said, that was the highlight of my year. And he laughed too. I got hobbit tossed a bit later by a very enormous, very tall Viking looking, but he was an Irishman. Well, he would have had Viking ancestry. He was so tall. Magnificent young man was a carpenter, threw me up in the air single-handedly by himself, like I was just a piece of floating blancmange. Anyway, on that note, Flotsam and Jetsom, where was I? Oh yes, I was still reading this dream out to you. Focus, Tanya Aarons. Right, yes, we had to fix the spelling of Sergeant Major. Snapping that out like a Sergeant Major of any self-respecting military genocider. Even in the dream, my hair crawled up the base of my skull because I actually hate having to act like that. It's awful. There's a history, darlings. Anyway, we need a place to sleep for the night. There is a storm coming. We heard you have room here, that you might take us in. I reply, I don't own this caravan cap. I would get into trouble subletting this space. There are about 40 of you. I don't have food or supplies for you. Please, one of the women say, it's just one night. I look at all of them. The fear was palpable. Jared looks at me and nods. He knows my kind heart, but this is dangerous. They are all strangers, men and women in their 20s and 30s. I look around, make an executive decision. The house is old but has red carpeted floors. It will be safe for them for one night. I tell them, the toilets are out the back. I don't want 40 of you making it obvious you are staying here, or we will all be cast out. Men, go pee outside on beautiful shrubs and use that urine to make things grow. For the other, we have to use the toilets, but be discreet, one at a time. Make no noise and make no obvious displays of meandering around in groups. Men, do not be touching or groping the women. I am Big Mama T, and there will be no sexual impropriety in my space here. One of the women of my vintage laughs and touches my belly. I look at her with surprise and mirth. You are not that big. Bless your heart, madame, I reply, and hug her with great enthusiasm in a bear hug. I am only allowing you all to stay because of the imminent danger. These are extraordinary times. Act accordingly, like gentlemen. Women, behave like ladies. I am not here to police your sexuality. We're all adults here, but this is not the time for bestial, inappropriate behaviours. As if there was ever a time for that, but it's me laying down the law. I would do that in real life, by the way, like that. Can't stand fucking creeps, female and male. Anyway, let us continue. They look at me with deep gratitude and nod. I start walking around the large empty room, which must have been a conference room. It was so large. I close the curtains. The curtains are rather thin and dusty. No smoking inside. I'm not responsible for any of you. You are here by your own choice for a night out of the weather, so be kind. May the gods keep us all safe. I think that's one of the reasons, I'm just going to segue, why I'm so fucking livid with my friend, humiliating me at that gig at the Koala Tavern, because, you know, he promised to keep me safe actually back in August 2023. I asked them all to keep a watch over me because I'd had threats of being stabbed, and, you know, oh, we just want you to be safe, we just want you safe, and then he did that. Appalling behaviour. Anyway, Mama T knows there's only one person that can keep me safe, and that's me. It's always been that way since I was a little tiny little 6-year-old girl. Anyway, moving right along, continuing with the dream. I walk to a room that is brightly lit with clothes on hangers. Jared assists me to carry them into our rooms. Lots of jackets, I suppose, to keep warm with. One young girl comes to assist us. My name is Leisha, she says. I found that interesting because I did know she was a friend of mine, a woman named Leisha. She looked nothing like this young girl though. The girl in the dream was about 18 or 19, very pretty and sweet and innocent looking. I tell her I won't remember her name, so please don't get offended. That's true of me in real life. If I'm staring at you like this and I'm struggling and I'm avoiding saying your name, drop it into the conversation, because that means I don't remember your name. And it's not that, I don't think you're good enough or that I'm trying to be rude. I genuinely, for some odd reason, probably brain damage from too many near deaths or too many strangulations, too many drownings as well, struggle to remember names. But I do learn it eventually in time, but it can take quite some time. People just think I'm being obnoxious. I'm just standing there like, hi, looking like a stunned mullet. Anyway, of course there are some people whose names I'd rather forget, you understand, and that's a kettle of a different fish. Then I really will be quite obnoxious, or I'll just blank you and pretend I didn't see you. Can't stand assholes of any stripe or variety. Anyway, where was I? My name is Leisha, she says. I tell her I won't remember her name, so please don't get offended. There are too many people. I am not good with names. She smiles happily, stands on her dignity, and gifts me her full name, Alicia Ermengarde, and 4 or 5 other names I already forget. I laugh. That is indeed a noble, complicated name. Hello, Mr. Turkey. I'm not giving you guys food today. It's a perfectly lovely day. You can get your own food, you little brats. Titleitis. I've instilled titleitis into my birds. It's my own stupid fault, isn't it? That is indeed a noble, complicated name. But what's in a name? It's souls, I recognise. She laughs. What of my soul? You, my dear, have a sweet one. She did indeed in the dream. I was looking at her thinking, what a lovely young girl. Whole world at her feet, young and fresh, knowing nothing about the world really. Oh, to be that sweet and innocent again. That's how I got married to that arsehole, isn't it? Maybe it's better to be worldly wise, cantankerous and crusty and a little bit embittered, you understand? Oh dear goddess. She laughs again. I enjoy her laughter tinkling like cascading champagne bubbles off a crystal glass. Champagne would be quite lovely right now. She oozes innocence. How will I protect her? Protect us all. It's in the lap of the gods, as life has always been. A great gift, a mystery, a cherished treasure. We must not fuck this up. I woke up, took off my CPAP mask. Think to myself, I would not ever want responsibility for so many people I don't know or trust. That was scary. just dreaming it. I hope it doesn't eventuate. The feeling of fear and displacement and being cast into a leadership role in a crisis was terrifying. I wonder if they all behaved themselves and we got through the night safely. What a dream, what a mind. No rest for the Tanya. Always trauma processing, even in her sleep. Weird, murky looking clouds again today, but they looked dirty and murky yesterday. But yesterday turned out to be an exquisite day. Would you believe the sun's come out, the birds could have stayed out there? It's lovely again. Never mind, boys. We sat, the birds and I, out in the sunshine and no wind, and I felt quite warm, but perhaps today will be the same. Anyway, always take the weather with you and trust in the gods. And if you're seafaring folk, know where your ship is berthed as well. That was a bit odd. Anyway, he was probably subliminally telling me he wished he could stay with me and go AWOL, am I right? My psych said, I think he was the one. I said, don't be ridiculous. He's just able seaman. He'll have a woman in every port. There's nothing special or unique about that at all. I said, I can't even believe I took it home. He said, why did you? I said, he amused me. But that was many years ago now, 2014. My 49th year, the year before I attempted suicide because of all the ugliness and viciousness. So at least I had 1 year of my life with a few, substantially interesting and happy memories. But what are my beautiful boys doing? Are you all okay? Alright, Mama's going to read to my audience on YouTube. I'm going to let you come out and fly. Alright? I'm going to be a good boy while I'm reading though. Yes. We've got to have freedom for the birdies. Freedom for the birdies. Freedom for the mama tea as well. Yes. I'll just shut this door so you don't go flying down into the other rooms and create havoc. You want to come out, little boy? No? Right. By the cockatiel was so stupid. I've just had his door open this whole time. Could have been out. Doesn't know what to do. Just sits there like a stunned mullet. Oh well. Anyway, can't help that. Can't help that at all. Right, let us continue now. We're 33 minutes in. I've had quite a few little funny segues and anecdotes from my past that I share with my YouTube audience. And, some of them are quite peculiar memories, but I still find them amusing to this day. And, yes, Flotsam and Jetsom is probably what made me think of a sailor, that watery motif. Right, here we go, people of Earth. Norman Grange was a rubber planter. He was up before daybreak to take the roll call of his labour, and then walked over the estate to see that the tapping was properly done. I'm just going to take my slippers off. I feel quite hot today. My feet are feeling really hot. I'll put my feet up. I'm going to relax. This duty performed, he came home, bathed and changed, and now with his wife opposite him, he was eating the substantial meal, half breakfast and half luncheon, which in Borneo is called brunch. He read as he ate. The dining room was dingy. The worn electroplate, the shabby cruet, the chipped dishes betokened poverty, but a poverty accepted with apathy. A few flowers would have brightened the table, but there was apparently no one to care how things looked. When Grange had finished, he belched, filled his pipe and lit it, rose from the table and went out onto the veranda. He took no more notice of his wife than if she had not been there. He lay down in a long rattan chair and went on reading. Mrs. Grange reached over for a tin of cigarettes and smoked while she sipped her tea. Suddenly she looked out, for the houseboy came up the steps and, accompanied by two men, went up to her husband. One was a Dayak and the other Chinese. Strangers seldom came. She could not imagine what they wanted. She got up and went to the door to listen. Though she had lived in Borneo for so many years, she knew no more Malay than was necessary to get along with the boys, and she only vaguely understood what was said. She gathered from her husband's tone that something had happened to annoy him. He seemed to be asking questions, first of the chink, again, excuse the racial slurs, people there, I didn't write this, and then of the Dayak. It looked as though they were pressing him to do something he didn't want to do. At length, however, with a frown on his face, he raised himself from his chair and, followed by the men, walked down the steps. Curious to see where he was going, she slipped out onto the veranda. He had taken the path that led down to the river. She shrugged her thin shoulders and went to her room. Presently she gave a violent start, for she heard her husband call her. Vesta! She came out. Get a bed ready. There's a white man in a prahu at the landing stage. He's damned ill. Who is he? How the hell should I know? They're just bringing him up. We can't have anyone to stay here. Shut up and do as I tell you. He left her on that and again went down to the river. Mrs. Grange called the boy and told him to put sheets on the bed in the spare room. Then she stood at the top of the steps and waited. In a little while she saw her husband coming back, and behind him a huddle of Dayaks carrying a man on a mattress. She stood aside to let them pass and caught a glimpse of a white face. What shall I do? She asked her husband. Get out and keep quiet. Polite, aren't you? The sick man was taken into the room, and in 2 or 3 minutes the Dayaks and Grange came out. I'm going to see about his kit. I'll have it brought up. His boy's looking after him, and there's no cause for you to butt in. What's the matter with him? Malaria. His boatmen are afraid he's going to die and won't take him on. His name's Skelton. He isn't going to die, is he? If he does, we'll bury him. But Skelton didn't die. He woke next morning and found himself in a room, in bed, and under a mosquito net. He couldn't think where he was. It was a cheap iron bed, and the mattress was hard, but to lie on it was a relief after the discomfort of the prahu. He could see nothing of the room but a chest of drawers, roughly made by a native carpenter, and a wooden chair. Opposite was a doorway with a blind down, and this, he guessed, led on to a veranda. "What are you doing over there? Are you a funny boy?" "Come," he called. The blind was drawn aside and his boy came in. The Chinaman's face broke into a grin when he saw that his master was free from fever. "You more better, Tuan? Very good. Where the devil am I?" Kong explained. "Luggage all right?" asked Skelton. "Yes, him all light." "What's the name of this fellow, the Tuan whose house this is?" "Mr. Norman Grange." To confirm what he said, he showed Skelton a little book in which the owner's name was written. It was Grange. Skelton noticed that the book was Bacon's Essays. It was curious to find it in a planter's house away up a river in Borneo. "Tell him I'll be glad to see him." "Tuan out, him come presently." "What about my having a wash? And by God, I want a shave." He tried to get out of bed, but his head swam, and with a bewildered cry, he sank back. But Kong shaved and washed him, and changed the shorts and singlet in which he had been lying ever since he fell ill, for a sarong and a baju. After that, he was glad to lie still. But presently Kong came in and said that the tuan of the house was back. There was a knock on the door and a large, stoutish man stepped in. "I hear you're better," he said. "Oh, much. It's terribly kind of you to have taken me in like this. It seems awful, planting myself on you." Grange answered a trifle harshly. "That's all right. You were pretty bad, you know. No wonder those Dyaks wanted to get rid of you." I don't I don't want to impose myself on you longer than I need. If I could hire a launch here, or a prahu, I could get off this afternoon." "There's no launch to hire. You'd better stay a bit. You must be as weak as a rat." "I'm afraid I shall be a frightful bother." "I don't see why. You've got your own boy and he'll look after you." Grange had just come in from his round of the estate and wore dirty shorts, a khaki shirt open at the neck, and an old battered terai hat. He looked as shabby as a beachcomber. He took off his hat to wipe his sweating brow. He had close-cropped grey hair. His face was red, a broad, fleshy face, with a large mouth under a stubble of grey moustache, a short, pugnacious nose, and small, mean eyes. "I wonder if you could let me have something to read," said Skelton. "What sort of thing? I don't mind so long as it's lightish. I'm not much of a novel reader myself, but I'll send you in 2 or 3 books. My wife can provide you with novels. They'll be trash, because that's all she reads. But it may suit you." With a nod, he withdrew. Not a very likeable man, but he was obviously very poor. The room in which Skelton lay, something in Grange's appearance, indicated that. He was probably manager of an estate on a cut salary, and it was not unlikely that the expense of a guest and his servant was unwelcome. Living in that remote spot, and so seeing white men but seldom, it might be that he was ill at ease with strangers. Some people improve unbelievably on acquaintance, but his hard, shifty little eyes were disconcerting. They gave the lie to the red face and the massive frame, which otherwise might have persuaded you that this was a jolly sort of fellow with whom you could quickly make friends. After a while, the houseboy came in with a parcel of books. There were half a dozen novels by authors he had never heard of, and a glance told him they were slop. These must be Mrs. Granger's. And then there was a Boswell's Johnson, Borrow's Lavengro, and Lamb's Essays, which was an odd choice. They were not the books you would have expected to find in a planter's house. In most planters' houses there is not more than a shelf or two of books, and for the most part they're detective stories. Skelton had a disinterested curiosity in human creatures, and he amused himself now by trying to make out from the books Norman Grange had sent, from the look of him, and from the few words they had exchanged, what sort of man he could be. Skelton was a little surprised that his host did not come to see him again that day. It looked as though he were going to content himself with giving his uninvited guest board and lodging, but were not sufficiently interested in him to seek his company. Next morning he felt well enough to get up, and with Kong's help settled himself in a long chair on the veranda. It badly needed a coat of paint. The bungalow stood on the brow of a hill about 50 yards from the river, and on the opposite bank, looking very small across that great stretch of water, you could see native houses on piles, nestling among the greenery. Skelton had not yet the activity of mind to read steadily, and after a page or two, his thoughts wandering, he found himself content to watch idly the sluggish flow of the turbid stream. Suddenly, he heard a step. He saw the little elderly woman come towards him, and knowing that this must be Mrs. Grange, tried to get up. "Don't move," she said. "I only came to see if you had everything you wanted." She wore a blue cotton dress, simple enough, but more suited to a young girl than to a woman of her age. Her short hair was tousled, as though on getting out of bed she had scarcely troubled to pass a comb through it, and dyed a vivid yellow, but badly, and the roots showed white. Her skin was raddled and dry, and there was a great dab of rouge on each cheekbone, put on, however, so clumsily that you could not for a moment take it for a natural colour, and a smear of lipstick on her mouth. But the strangest thing about her was a tic she had that made her jerk her head as though she were beckoning you to an inner room. It seemed to come at regular intervals, perhaps 3 times a minute, and her left hand was in almost constant movement. It was not quite a tremble, it was a rapid twirl, as though she wanted to draw your attention to something behind her back. Skelton was startled by her appearance and embarrassed by her tic. "I hope I am not making myself too great a nuisance," he said. "I think I shall be well enough to make a move tomorrow or the day after. It's not often we see anybody in a place like this, you know. It's a treat to have someone to talk to. Won't you sit down? I'll tell my boy to bring you a chair. Norman said I was to leave you alone. I haven't spoken to a white person for 2 years. I've been longing for a good old talk." Her head twitched violently, more quickly than usual, and her hand gave that queer, spasmodic gesture. "He won't be back for another hour. I'll get a chair." I'm frowning because I was going to quip that she was probably on Abilify, which gave me a weird little involuntary arm movement too. It's quite horrible actually. Shuffling and drooling with my arm jerking involuntarily. But I don't think Abilify was invented back in the 30s and 40s when these stories were written. She must have had some other, perhaps mild cerebral palsy or some other reason to cause the tics. "He won't be back for another hour. I'll get a chair." Skelton told her who he was and what he was doing, but he discovered that she had questioned his boy and already knew all about him. "You must be crazy to get back to England," she asked. "I shan't be sorry." Suddenly Mrs. Grange seemed to be attacked by what one could only describe as a nerve storm. Her head twitched so madly, her hand shook with such fury that it was disconcerting. He could only look away. "You must be crazy to get back to England," she asked. Oh, sorry, I've looked back in the space-time continuum. Dear goddess. You could only look away. "I haven't been to England for 16 years, she said. "You don't mean that? Why, I thought all you planters went home every 5 years at the longest." "I haven't been back to New Zealand since the end of 2004, early 2005. I got my passport renewed last year, and was it the year before now? Yeah, it would have been 2023. I was planning to go home in February 24, and then I had no money, and now another year's rolled on and I'm not going home. I've decided. It's a waste of time and money. Don't even hear from that friend anymore anyway, so why bother? And it'll just be triggering for me, seeing the old country, my childhood home, and all those horrible memories that reside in me anyway. I don't need to rip them off like a band-aid at the actual place. It's too much. I deserve peace and joy in my older age. peace and joy in time with someone wonderful. Anyway, where were we? We can't afford it. We're broke to the wide. It's a strange expression. We're broke to the wide. Must be an English saying. Norman put all the money he had into this plantation. Yes, Kermie. And it hasn't really paid for years. It only just brings in enough to keep us from starvation. Of course, it doesn't matter to Norman. He isn't English, really. He looks English enough. He was born in Sarawak. His father was in the government service. If anything, he's a native of Borneo. Then, without warning, she began to cry. It was horribly painful to see the tears running down the raddled, painted cheeks of that woman with the constant tick. I wonder if her tick would have settled down if she'd gotten away from a bastard who tells her to shut up and get out and just ignores her all the time with absolute contempt. The nerves might have improved and the ticks might have settled down. Anyway. Skelton knew neither what to say nor what to do. He did what was probably the best thing. He kept silent. He dried her tears. You must think me a silly old fool. I sometimes wonder that after all these years, yes, Kermie, I can still cry. I suppose it's in my nature. I always could cry very easy when I was on the stage. Oh, were you on the stage? Yes, before I married. That's how I met Norman. We were playing in Singapore and he was there on holiday. I don't suppose I shall ever see England any more. I shall stay here till I die, and every day of my life I shall look at that beastly river. I shall never get away now. Never. Dear Goddess. How did you happen to find yourself in Singapore? Well, what are you doing singing, boy? You're singing the mama a song. Are you singing me a pretty song? Ready? Right, where were we? How did you happen to find yourself in Singapore? Well, it was soon after the war. I couldn't get anything to suit me in London. I'd been on the stage a good many years, and I was fed up with playing small parts. So still outside, you could almost drop a pin. Unusual and a bit eerie given all the wind we've had. Right, where was I? The agents told me a fellow called Victor Palace was taking a company out east. His wife was playing lead, but I could play seconds. They'd got half a dozen plays, comedies, you know, and farces. The salary wasn't much, but they were going to Egypt and India. the Malay States and China, and then down to Australia. It was a chance to see the world, and I accepted. We didn't do badly in Cairo, and I think we made money in India, but Burma wasn't much good, and Siam was worse. Penang was a disaster, and so were the rest of the Malay states. Well, one day Victor called us together and said he was bust. He hadn't got the money for our fares to Hong Kong, and the tour was a washout, and he was very sorry, but we'd have to get back home as best we could. Of course, we told him he couldn't do that to us. You never heard such a row. Well, the long and the short of it was that he said we could have the scenery and the props if we thought they was any good to us. But as to money, it was no good asking for it, because he damned well hadn't got it. And next day we found out that him and his wife, without saying a word to anybody, had got on a French boat and skipped. What a mean thing to do to people. That's a shitty thing to do. I was in a rare state, I can tell you. Indeed, I would be too. I had a few pounds I'd saved out of my salary, and that was all. Somebody told me if we was absolutely stranded, the government would have to send us home, but only steerage, and I didn't much fancy that. We got the press to put our plight before the public, and someone came along with the proposition that we should give a benefit performance. Well, we did, but it wasn't much without Victor or his wife, and by the time we'd paid the expenses, we weren't any better off than we'd been before. I was at my wits' end, I don't mind telling you. It was then that Norman proposed to me. The funny thing is that I hardly knew him. He'd taken me for a drive round the island, and we'd had tea 2 or 3 times at the Europe and danced. Men don't often do things for you without wanting something in return, and I thought he expected to get a little bit of fun. But I'd had a good deal of experience, and I thought he'd be clever if he got round me. But when he asked me to marry him, wow, I was so surprised. Couldn't hardly believe me own ears. He said he'd got his own estate in Borneo, and it only wanted a little patience, and he'd make a packet. And it was on the banks of a fine river, and all round was the jungle. He made it sound very romantic. I was getting on, you know. I was 30. Wasn't going to be any easier to get work as time went on, and it was tempting to have a house of my own and all that. Never to have to hang around agents' offices no more. Never to have to lay awake no more and wonder how you was going to pay next week's rent. He wasn't a bad-looking chap in those days, brown and big and virile. No one could say I was willing to marry anybody just to. Suddenly she stopped. There he is. Don't say you've seen me. She picked up the chair she had been sitting in and quickly slipped away with it into the house. Skelton was bewildered. Her grotesque appearance, the painful tears, her story told with that incessant twitching, and then her obvious fear when she heard her husband's voice in the compound, and her hurried escape, could make nothing of it. In a few minutes Norman Grange stumped along the veranda. "I hear you're better," he said. "Much, thanks." If you care to join us at brunch, I'll have a place laid for you. I'd like it very much. All right, I'm just going to have a bath and a change. He walked away. Presently a boy came along and told Skelton his tuan was waiting for him. Skelton followed him into a small sitting room with the jalousies drawn to keep out the heat, an uncomfortable, overcrowded room with a medley of furniture, English and Chinese, and occasional tables littered with worthless junk. It was neither cosy nor cool. Grange had changed into a sarong and a baju, and in the native dress looked coarse but powerful. He introduced Skelton to his wife. She shook hands with him as though she had never seen him before and uttered a few polite words of greeting. I'm just going to get this light up too. It's coming from the other angle, isn't it? Well, I'm a bit tessellated and glitching in and out of the matrix, but you get that, people, there. When you're interdimensional like the timer, it's just the sun behind the trees coming in at an odd angle. Right, actually I'll move over here slightly. Is that better? Yes, because it was stabbing me in my eyeballs. Can't stand sunlight stabbing me in my eyeballs. Right. Sorry, we'll repeat that sentence. She shook hands with him as though she had never seen him before and uttered a few polite words of greeting. The boy announced that their meal was ready and they went into the dining room. I hear that you've been in this bloody country for some time, said Grange. 2 years. I'm an anthropologist and I wanted to study the manners and customs of tribes that haven't had any contact with civilization. Come on, little boy, come and join us. Come on, baby boy. Come on, sweet boy. Skelton felt that he should tell his host how it had come about that he had been forced to accept a hospitality which he could not but feel was grudgingly offered. After leaving the village that had been his headquarters, he had journeyed by land for 10 days till he reached the river. There he had engaged a couple of prahus, one for himself and his luggage, and the other for Kong, his Chinese servant, and the camp equipment, to take him to the coast. The long trek across country had been hard going, and he found it very comfortable to lie on a mattress under an awning of rattan matting and take his ease. All the time he had been away, Skelton had been in perfect health, and as he travelled down the river, he could not but think that he was very lucky. But even as the thought passed through his mind, it occurred to him that if he happened just then to congratulate himself on his good fortune in this respect, it was because he did not feel quite so well as usual. It was true that he had been forced to drink a great deal of arrack the night before at the Longhouse, where he had put up, but he was used to it, and that hardly accounted for his headache. He had a general sense of malaise. He was wearing nothing but shorts and a singlet, and he felt chilly It was curious because the sun was shining fiercely, and when he put his hand on the gunwale of the prahu, the heat was hardly bearable. If he had had a coat handy, he would have put it on. He grew colder and colder, and presently his teeth began to chatter. He huddled up on his mattress, shivering all over in a desperate effort to get warm. He could not fail to guess what was the matter. Christ, he groaned, malaria. He called the head man who was steering the prahu. Get Kong. The head man shouted to the second prahu and ordered his own paddlers to stop. In a moment the two boats were side by side and Kong stepped in. I've got fever, Kong, gasped Skelton. Get me the medicine chest, and for God's sake, blankets. I'm freezing to death. Kong gave his master a big dose of quinine and piled on him what coverings they had. They started off again. Skelton was too ill to be taken ashore when they tied up for the night, and so passed it in the prahu. All next day and the day after he was very ill. Sometimes one or other of the crew came and looked at him, and often the head man stayed for quite a while staring at him thoughtfully. How many days to the coast, Skelton? Asked the boy. 4, 5. He paused for a minute. Head man, he no go coast. He say he want you go home. Tell him to go to hell. Head man say you valley sick, you die. If you die, he go coast, he catch you trouble. I'm not thinking of dying, said Skelton. I shall be all right. It's just an ordinary go of malaria. Kong did not answer. The silence irritated Skelton. He knew that the Chinese had something in mind that he did not like to say. Spit it out, you fool, he cried. Skelton's heart sank when Kong told him the truth. When they reached their resting place that night, the head man was going to demand his money and slip away with the two prahus before dawn. He was too frightened to carry a dying man farther. Skelton had no strength to take the determined attitude that might have availed him. He could only hope by the offer of more money to persuade the head man to carry out his agreement. The day passed in long arguments between Kong and the head man. But when they tied up for the night, the head man came to Skelton and told him sulkily that they would go no farther. There was a long house nearby where he might get lodging till he grew better. He began to unload the baggage. Skelton refused to move. He got Kong to give him his revolver and swore to shoot anyone who came near him. Kong, the crew, and the head man went up to the long house, and Skelton was left alone. Hour after hour he lay there, the fever burning his body and his mouth parched, while muddled thoughts hammered away in his brain. Then there were lights and the sound of men talking. The Chinese boy came from the head man and another man whom Skelton had not yet seen from the neighbouring longhouse. He did his best to understand what Kong was telling him. It appeared that a few hours downstream there lived a white man. and to his house, if that would satisfy Skelton. The head man was willing to take him. More better you say yes, said Con. Maybe white man has launch, then we go down to coast. Chop chop. Who is he? Planter, said Con. This fellow say him have rubber estate. Skelton was too tired to argue further. All he wanted just then was to sleep. He accepted the compromise. To tell you the truth, he finished, I don't remember much more till I woke up yesterday morning to find myself an uninvited guest in your house. I don't blame those Dyaks, you know, said Grange. When I came down to the prahu and saw you, I thought you were for it. Mrs. Grange sat silent while Skelton told his story, her head and her hand twitching regularly, as though by the action of some invisible clockwork. But when her husband addressed her, asking for the Worcester sauce, and that was the only time he spoke to her, she was seized with such a paroxysm of involuntary movement that it was horrible to see. She passed him what he asked for without a word. Skelton got an uncomfortable impression that she was terrified of Grange. It was odd, because to all appearance he was not a bad soul. He was knowledgeable, far from stupid, and though you could not have said that his manner was cordial, it was plain that he was ready to be of what service he could. They finished their meal and separated to rest through the heat of the day. See you again at 6 for a sundowner, said Grange. When Skelton had had a good sleep, a bath and a read, he went out onto the veranda. Mrs. Grange came up to him. It looked as though she had been waiting. He's back from the office. Don't think it's funny if I don't speak to you. If he thought I liked having you here, he'd turn you out tomorrow. She said these words in a whisper and slipped back into the house. Skelton was startled. It was a strange house he had come into in a strange manner. He went into the overcrowded sitting room and there found his host. He had been worried by the evident poverty of the establishment, and he felt that the Grangers could ill afford even the small expense he must be putting them to. But he had already formed the impression that Grange was a quick-tempered, susceptible man, and he did not know how he would take an offer to help. He made up his mind to risk it. Look here, he said to him, it looks as though I might have to inflict myself on you for several days. I'd be so much more comfortable if you'd let me pay for my board and lodging. Oh, that's all right. Your lodging costs nothing. The house belongs to the mortgagees, and your board doesn't come to much. Well, there are drinks anyway, and I'd have to come down on your stores of tobacco and cigarettes. It's not more than once a year that anyone comes up here, and then it's only the D.O. or someone like that. Besides, when one's as broke as I am, nothing matters much. Well, then, will you take my camp equipment? I shan't be wanting it any more, and if you'd like one of my guns, I'd be only too glad to leave it with you. Grange hesitated. There was a glimmer of cupidity in those small, cunning eyes of his. If you'd let me have one of your guns, You'd pay for your board and lodging over and over again. That settled then. They began to talk over the whisky and sparkler with which, following the Eastern habit, they celebrated the setting of the sun. My rhinoceros facing in odd directions. Over. Discovering that they both played chess, they had a game. Mrs. Grange did not join them till dinner. The meal was dull, an insipid soup, a tasteless river fish, a tough piece of steak, and a caramel pudding. Oh, yum. Normal. I'm obsessed over the pudding, can you tell? Norman Grange and Skelton drank beer, Mrs. Grange water. She never of her own will uttered a word. Skelton had again the uncomfortable impression that she was scared to death of her husband. Once or twice, Skelton, from common politeness, sought to brought her into the conversation, addressing himself to her, telling her a story, or asking her a question, but it evidently distressed her so much, her head twitched so violently, her hand was agitated by gestures so spasmodic, that he thought it kinder not to insist. When the meal was over, she got up. "I'll leave you gentlemen to your port," she said. Both the men got up as she left the room. It was rather absurd and somehow sinister to see this social pretence in those poverty-stricken surroundings on a Borneo river. I may add that there is no port. There might be a little Benedictine left. Oh, don't bother. They talked for a while, and Grange began to yawn. He got up every morning before sunrise, and by 9 o'clock at night could hardly keep his eyes open. "Well, I'm going to turn in," he said. He nodded to Skelton, and without further ceremony left him. Skelton went to bed, but he could not sleep. Though the heat was oppressive, it was not the heat that kept him awake. There was something horrible about that house and those two people who lived in it. He didn't know what it was that affected him with this peculiar uneasiness, but this he knew, that he would be heartily thankful to be out of it and away from them. Grange had talked a good deal about himself, but he knew no more of him than he had learned at the first glance. To all appearances, he was just the commonplace planter who had fallen upon evil days. "You singing?" He had bought his land immediately after the war and had planted trees, but by the time they were bearing the slump had come, and since then it had been a constant struggle to keep going. The estate and the house were heavily mortgaged, and now that rubber was once more selling profitably, all he made went to the mortgagees. That was an old story in Malaya. What made Grange somewhat unusual was that he was a man without a country. Born in Borneo, he had lived there with his parents till he was old enough to go to school in England. At 17 he had come back, and had never left it since except to go to Mesopotamia during the war. England meant nothing to him. He had neither relations nor friends there. Most planters, like civil servants, have come from England, go back on leave now and then, and look forward to settling down there when they retire. But what had England to offer Norman Grange? I was born here, he said, and I shall die here. I'm a stranger to England. I don't like their ways over there, and I don't understand the things they talk about. And yet I am a stranger here too. To the Malays and the Chinese, I'm a white man, though I speak Malay as well as they do, and a white man I shall always be. Then he said a significant thing. Of course, if I'd had any sense, I'd have married a Malay girl and had half a dozen half-caste kids. That's the only solution really for us chaps who were born and bred here. Granger's bitterness was greater than could be explained by his financial embarrassment. He had little good to say of any of the white men in the colony. He seemed to think that they despised him because he was native born. He was a sour, disappointed fellow, and a conceited one. He had shown Skelton his books. There were not many of them, but they were the best on the whole that English literature can show. He had read them over and over again, but it looked as though he had learnt from them neither charity nor loving kindness. It looked as though their beauty had left him unmoved, and to know them so well had only made him self-complacent. His exterior, which was so hearty and English, seemed to have little relation to the man within. You could not resist the suspicion that it masked a very sinister being. Early next morning, to enjoy the cool of the day, Skelton, with his pipe and a book, was sitting on the veranda outside his room. He was still very weak, but felt much better. In a little while, Mrs. Grange joined him. She held in her hand a large album. I thought I'd like to show you some of me old photos and me notices. You mustn't think I always looked like what I do now. He's off on his round, and he won't be back for 2 or 3 hours yet. Mrs. Grange, in the same blue dress she had worn the day before, her hair as untidy, appeared strangely excited. It's all I have to remind me of the past. Sometimes, when I can't bear life any more, I look at my album. She sat by Skelton's side as she turned the pages. The notices were from provincial papers, and the references to Mrs. Grange, whose stage name had been apparently Vesta Blaze, were carefully underlined. I've still got all my daughters', reviews and that I cherish. Never mind, mustn't think about it. Maybe I'll burn them one day, not out of spite, but just it's a point in holding on to things when you have no contact with your family anymore. They have no contact with you. It's just keeping dead energy around. It's a waste of time and space. It's sacred space. I probably won't burn them though, because I'm the family archivist. I did, however, burn photos of my second strangler from my Moroccan-Israeli former lover from 1996 to 1990. Halfway through 1998, that fucking pig. I was actually astonished when I went through the album that I still had photos of her. 25, well, more than 25, 27 years later. So I burnt them. There's no point keeping that thing in my, actually taking up my space on my walls like pus, am I right? It's good to let things go. Let the bastards go. Slough them off like old skins. Real loves would never, ever, ever, ever have even dreamed about being so vicious and evil and abusive. The fact that pattern got repeated is ghastly beyond belief, but I must remember now we have a different manifestation of evil, more dangerous than anything going on in men's minds and brains in 1998. This one, a bioweapon sitting like worms in their fucking arteries. So it's incumbent on me to forgive them, because they literally are not well and not consciously aware of their actions, and therefore even more dangerous than ever before, people of Earth. It's a chilling thought, but have to remain conscious of that. Sick people doing sick, cruel, sadistic things, who are unconscionable and without any remorse, dangerous and not quite human. Seriously. Anyway. From the photographs, you could see that she had been pretty enough in an undistinguished way. She had acted in musical comedy and revue, in farce and comedy, and taking the photographs and the notices together, it was easy to tell that here had been the common, dreary, rather vulgar career of the girl with no particular talent, who has taken to the stage on the strength of a pretty face and a good figure. Her head twitching, her hand shaking, Mrs. Grange looked at the photographs and read the notices with as much interest as if she had never seen them before. Oh, bless darling. Her one achievement in life robbed from her by an awful venal man. Awful it is what happens to beautiful, free-spirited, often naive women. You've got to have influence on the stage, and I never had any, she said. If I'd only had my chance, I know I'd have made good. I had bad luck. There's no doubt about that. It was all sordid and somewhat pathetic. I dare say you're better off as you are, said Skelton. She snatched the book from him and shut it with a bang. She had a paroxysm so violent that it was really frightening to look at her. What do you mean by that? What do you know about the life I lead here? I'd have killed myself years ago, only I know he wants me to die. That's the only way I can get back on him, by living. You go, sister. and I am going to live. I'm going to live as long as he does. Oh, I hate him. I've often thought I'd poison him, but I was afraid. I didn't know how to do it really, and if he died, the chinks would fall close and I'd be turned out. And where should I go then? I haven't a friend in the world. Skelton was aghast. It flashed through his mind that she was crazy. He hadn't a notion what to say. She gave him a keen look. I suppose it surprises you to hear me talk like that. I mean it, you know, every word of it. He'd like to kill me too, but he daren't either. And he knows how to do it all right. He knows how the Malays kill people. He was born here. There's nothing he doesn't know about the country. Skelton forced himself to speak. You know, Mrs. Grange, I'm a total stranger. Don't you think it's rather unwise to tell me all sorts of things there's no need for me to know? After all, you live a very solitary life. I dare say you get on one another's nerves. Now that things are looking up, perhaps you'll be able to make that trip to England. I don't want to go to England. I'd be ashamed to let them see me like I am now. Do you know how old I am? 46. I look 60, and I know it. That's why I showed you those photos, so you might see I wasn't always like what I am now. Oh my God, how I've wasted my life. They talk of the romance of the East. They can have it. I'd rather be a dresser in a provincial theatre. I'd rather be one of the sweepers that keep it clean than what I am now. Until I came here, I'd never been alone in my life. I'd always lived in a crowd. You don't know what it is to have nobody to talk to from year's end to year's end. No, it's not going to work, is it? The sun has shifted again. Right, I've got a screech in the corner again. Maybe. Right, here we go. That'll do. Not quite so blotchy now. Only slightly blotchy. Right, where were we? To have to keep it all bottled up. How would you like to see no one week in and week out, day after day, for 16 years, except the man you hate most in the world? How would you like to live for 16 years with a man who hates you so he can't bear to look at you? Oh, come, it can't be as bad as that. I'm telling you the truth. Why should I tell you a lie? I shall never see you again. What do I care what you think of me? And if you tell them what I've said when you get down to the coast, what's the odds? They'll say, God, you don't mean to say you stayed with those people? I pity you. He's an outsider, and she's crazy. Got a tic. They say it looks as if she was always trying to wipe the blood off her dress. They were mixed up in a damned funny business, but no one ever really knew the ins and outs of it. It all happened a long time ago, and the country was Pretty wild in those days. A damned funny business, and no mistake. I'd tell you for 2 pins there would be a bit of dirt for them at the club. You wouldn't have to pay for a drink for days. Damn them. Oh, Christ, how I hate this country. I hate that river. I hate this house. I hate that damned rubber. I loathe the filthy natives. And that's all I've got to look forward to till I die. Till I die without a doctor to take care of me, without a friend to hold me hand. She began to cry hysterically. Mrs. Grange had spoken with a dramatic intensity of which Skelton would never have thought her capable. Her coarse irony was as painful as her anguish. Skelton was young. He was not yet 30, but he did not know how to deal with a difficult situation. But he could not keep silent. I'm terribly sorry, Mrs. Grange. I wish I could do something to help you. I'm not asking for your help. No one can help me. Skelton was distressed. From what she said, he could not but suspect that she had been concerned in a mysterious and perhaps dreadful occurrence, and it might be that to tell him about it without fear of consequences was just the relief she needed. I don't want to butt into what's no business of mine, but, Mrs. Grange, if you think it would ease your mind to tell me what you were referring to just now, I mean, what you said was a damned funny business. I promise you on my word of honour that I'll never repeat it to a living soul. She stopped crying quite suddenly and gave him a long, intent look. She hesitated. He had an impression that the desire to speak was almost irresistible. But she shook her head and sighed. It wouldn't do any good. Nothing can do me any good. She got up and abruptly left him. The two men sat down to brunch by themselves. My wife asks you to excuse her, said Grange. She's got one of her sick headaches, and she's staying in bed today. Oh, I'm sorry. Skelton had a notion that in the searching look that Grange gave him was mistrust and animosity. It flashed through his mind that somehow he had discovered that Mrs. Grange had been talking to him and perhaps had said things that should have been left unsaid. Skelton made an effort at conversation, but his host was taciturn, and they ended the meal in a silence that was only broken by Grange when he got up. You seem pretty fit today, and I don't suppose you want to stay in this God-forsaken place longer than you must. I've sent over the river to arrange for a couple of prahus to take you down to the coast. They'll be here at 6 tomorrow morning. Skelton felt sure then that he was right. Grange knew or guessed that his wife had spoken too freely, and he wanted to be rid, as soon as possible, of the dangerous visitor. Are you eating your sunflower seeds? Oh, you're a good boy. Oh, you're such a good boy. Yes, you are. He's a beautiful boy. Bumpity, bumpity, bump. That's terribly kind of you, Skelton answered, smiling. I'm as fit as a fiddle. But in Granger's eyes was no answering smile. They were coldly hostile. We might have another game of chess later on, said he. All right. When do you get back from your office? I haven't got much to do there today. I shall be about the house. Skelton wondered if it were only his fancy that there was something very like a threat in the tone in which Grange uttered these words. It looked as though he were going to make sure that his wife and Skelton should not again be left alone. Mrs. Grange did not come to dinner. They drank their coffee and smoked their cheroots. Then Grange, pushing back his chair, said, We've got to make an early start tomorrow. I dare say you'd like to turn in. I shall have started out on my round by the time you go, so I'll say goodbye to you now. Let me get my guns. I want you to take the one you like best. I'll tell the boy to fetch them. The guns were brought, and Grange made his choice. He made no sign that he was pleased with the handsome gift. You quite understand that this gun's worth a damned sight more than what your food and drink and smoke have run me into, he said. For all I know, you saved my life. I don't think an old gun is an over-generous return for that. Oh, well, if you like to look at it that way, I suppose it's your own business. Thank you very much all the same. They shook hands and parted. Next morning, while the baggage was being stowed away in the prahus, Skelton asked the houseboy whether, before starting, he could say goodbye to Mrs. Grange. The houseboy said he would go and see. He waited a little while. Mrs. Grange came out of her room onto the veranda. She was wearing a pink dressing gown, shabby, rumpled, and none too clean, of Japanese silk, heavily trimmed with cheap lace. The powder was thick on her face, her cheeks were rouged, and her lips scarlet with lipstick. Her head seemed to twitch more violently than usual, and her hand was agitated by that strange gesture. When first Skelton saw it, he had thought that it suggested a wish to call attention to something behind her back. But now, after what she had told him yesterday, it did indeed look as though she was constantly trying to brush something off her dress. Blood, she had said. I didn't want to go without thanking you for all your kindness to me, he said. Oh, that's all right. Well, Goodbye. I'll walk down with you to the landing stage. They hadn't far to go. The boatman was still arranging the luggage. Skelton looked across the river where you could see some native houses. I suppose these men come from over there. It looks quite a village. No, only those few houses. There used to be a rubber estate there, but the company went broke and it was abandoned. Do you ever go over there? Me? Cried Mrs. Grange. Her voice rose shrill and her head, her hand, were on a sudden convulsed by a paroxysm of involuntary movement. No, why should I? Skelton could not imagine why that simple question, asked merely for something to say, should so greatly upset her. But by now all was in order, and he shook hands with her. He stepped into the boat and comfortably settled down. They pushed off. He waved to Mrs. Grange. As the boat slid into the current, she cried out with a harsh, strident scream, "Give my regards to Leicester Square." Skelton heaved a great sigh of relief as with their powerful strokes the paddlers took him farther and farther away from that dreadful house and from those two unhappy and yet repellent people. He was glad now that Mrs. Grange had not told him the story that was on the tip of her tongue to tell. He did not want some tragic tale of sin or folly to connect him with them in a recollection that he could not escape. He wanted to forget them as one forgets a bad dream. But Mrs. Grange watched the two prahus till a bend of the river took them out of sight. She walked slowly up to the house and went into her bedroom. The light was dim because the blinds were drawn to keep out the heat, but she sat down at her dressing table and stared at herself in the glass. Norman had had the dressing table made for her soon after they were married. It had been made by a native carpenter, of course, and they had had the mirror sent from Singapore, but it was made to her own design, of the exact size and shape she wanted, with plenty of room for all her toilet things and her makeup. It was a dressing table she had hankered after for donkey's years and had never had. She remembered still how pleased she was when first she had it. She threw her arms round her husband's neck and kissed him. "Oh, Norman, you are good to me," she said. "I'm a lucky little girl to have caught a chap like you. Aren't I?" But then everything delighted her. She was amused by the river life and the life of the jungle, the teeming growth of the forest, the birds with their gay plumage, and the brilliant butterflies. She set about giving the house a woman's touch. She put out all her own photographs, and she got vases to put flowers in. She routed around and got a lot of knick-knacks to place here and there. They make a room look homey, she said. She wasn't in love with Norman, but she liked him all right. And it was lovely to be married. It was lovely to have nothing to do from morning till night except play the gramophone or Patience and read novels. It was lovely to think one hadn't got to bother about one's future. Of course, it was a bit lonely sometimes, but Norman said she'd get used to that, and he'd promised that in a year or two at the outside, he'd take her to England for 3 months. It would be a lark to show him off to her friends. She felt that what had caught him was the glamour of the stage, and she'd made herself out a good deal more successful than she really had been. She wanted him to realise that she'd made a sacrifice when she'd thrown up her career to become a planter's wife. She'd claimed acquaintance with a good many stars that, in point of fact, she'd never even spoken to. That would need a bit of handling when they went home, but she'd manage it. After all, poor Norman knew no more about the stage than a babe unborn. If she couldn't cod a simple fellow like that after 12 years on the stage, well, she'd wasted her time, that's all she could say. Things went all right the first year. At one point, she thought she was going to have a baby. They were both disappointed when it turned out not to be true. Then she began to grow bored. It seemed to her that she'd done the same damned thing day after day, forever, and it frightened her to think that she'd have to go on doing the same damned thing day after day, forever more. Norman said he couldn't leave the plantation that year. They had a bit of a scene. It was then that he said something that scared her. "I hate England," he said. "If I had my way, I'd never set foot in the damned country again." Living this lonely life, Mrs. Grange got into the habit of talking out loud to herself. Shut up in her room, she could be heard chattering away hour after hour, and now, dipping the puff in her powder and plastering her face with it, she addressed her reflection in the mirror exactly as though she were talking to another person. That ought to have warned me. I should have insisted on going by myself, and who knows, I might have got a job when I got to London, with all the experience I had and everything. Then I'd have written to him and said I wasn't coming back. Her thoughts turned to Skelton. Pity I didn't tell him, she continued. I had half a mind to. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps it would have eased me mind. I wonder what he'd have said. She imitated his Oxford accent. "I'm so terribly sorry, Mrs. Grange. I wish I could help you." She gave a chuckle, which was almost a sob. I'd have liked to tell him about Jack. Oh, Jack. It was when they had been married for 2 years that they got a neighbour. The price of rubber at that time was so high that new estates were being put under cultivation, and one of the big companies had bought a great tract of land on the opposite bank of the river. It was a rich company, and everything was done on a lavish scale. The manager they had put in had a launch at his disposal, so that it was no trouble for him to pop over and have a drink whenever he felt inclined. Jack Carr, his name was. So one of my videos I've made in the last few days is going a bit viral and always amuses me when that happens. It's just random how that will just randomly suddenly be oh so popular. Well, I stand by my beliefs no matter how out there they might appear to the uninitiated, as I've seen how my Australian society has gone into serious deep dive. And yesterday I read, I don't agree with the chappie, or what's his name? He writes a Substack. He's a bit of a Trump for later, and it's just nauseating beyond belief. But he actually wrote as part of that long screed. Oh, we must be factual. I have to find it again. Just a bit of a segue here. Sorry guys, but where was it? It was in my mail. Anyway, he said that sudden and unexpected deaths have increased in the United States of America by 190%. So I stand by what I said yesterday, that it's some kind of invasion or infestation that's not human, because it's just outrageous. Did I keep it or did I delete it after reading it? Oh, here's his name. Yeah, here's the article. Jeff Childers, Coffee and Co. I was going to share it on my Facebook, I usually do, but defiantly and in your face, but I realised that I have on my Facebook currently 111 people, and that when I share these things that are statistical and fact-based, so, not misinformation or disinformation, but based on actual insurance and, what did he say? Funeral director's records, so it's factual, but I don't want to frighten people. It's bad enough you come to my YouTube channel and get frightened anyway, don't you? But he wrote about it, and I was astonished. But it was something that was inevitable, really, inevitable. So and I've seen the changes in personality and people I loved and thought very highly of in the last 5 years. That's been the most terrifying and chilling of all, because you don't know who you're dealing with anymore. It's complete alteration of their presentation and their behaviours and their normal way of relating, at least towards me in the past, but I'm sure that they would have been noticed by others closer to them. Maybe, maybe not, because when you're too close to it, you tend to be a bit blindsided. It's easy for someone that you don't live with or see on a regular basis or on a daily basis to notice the extraordinary changes in them. I'll just read a paragraph from his writing yesterday. Actually, it was written on the 3rd of July. But even that unsettling news was that Centene, which is has a risk pool. Centene is some health insurance thing in America. Let me go back a paragraph. The fact that Centene had to suddenly withdraw guidance, not revise, not adjust, but yank it entirely, and instead report a devastating 1.8 billion projected hole based on new data from its auditors, suggests the trend was recent and sharp, not gradual. The scope or scale was unexpected, possibly exponential. This chap that's writing is a lawyer by profession in America. Their previous assumptions were suddenly falsified in an astonishingly short time frame. That means the underlying risk landscape shifted materially and fast. But even that unsettling news wasn't what turned my blood to icy sludge. It was another dot that snapped, right into place. On June 29th, I ran a different story at that time describing a happy Doge success story. The story was about the federal government's new plan to claw back 50% of fraudulent Social Security overpayments, a welcome development. Here's the thing, the clawbacks hadn't started yet, but in my optimism I decorated the story with this graph, which showed the largest drop-off in Social Security payments in history starting this year. Just so you know that my ravings are not the ravings of a mad woman, but a woman that was very well aware of how this was going to go. Very, very bad, very, very quickly, 5 years ago, and why I held my line. Not just to protect my own very precarious health, but tried to protect others as much as possible, but I was shadow banned and silenced on all social media platforms, not just this one, by the way. This is the fallout, people, of your actions, consequences of your actions, which are chilling and terrifying, that you didn't have the intelligence to see the long range, effects of all of this. Blows my mind. It wasn't that hard to work it out. It wasn't rocket science. So, Jeff Childers was his name, did I say? I can't even remember. Anyway, Childers continues writing. So this morning, as I considered Centene's disaster story, my lawyer's brain automatically clicked back to that surprising Social Security graph. Now, don't get me wrong, it absolutely could be improved. Waste, fraud and abuse tracking, as I'd supposed on June 29th, but I was just guessing. The administration hasn't taken any victory laps claiming that historically reduced Social Security payments were the fruits of Doge labour, not officially or even unofficially. I was just trying to connect some dots. But what if there's another explanation? What if the historic downward spike in Social Security payouts is because there are suddenly a lot fewer seniors? They're getting desperate out there for their food, the little mites. He continues writing, I don't want to make these kinds of connections, but after years of litigation training, I can't help it. The Social Security chart is evidence that reinforces the Centene bombshell, a massive, actuarially driven revelation of sudden and unexpectedly high morbidity and shrinking insured populations in Medicaid and the ACA exchanges, two entirely separate systems. Read between the lines. Two different populations, one unmistakable pattern, rapidly shrinking roles of government-dependent individuals, precisely as healthcare costs suddenly explode. If large numbers of Centene's clients are disappearing and Social Security payouts are plummeting simultaneously, it's not just plausible, but it's even likely that we're seeing the same people vanish from two systems at once. The same will probably be reflected or mirrored here in Australia too. They just sit on it and keep it very, very quiet, people there. Don't want to scare us. Hide their nefarious deeds, by the way. Hope to keep us confused and deemed crazy. We dare to question or ask for media cooperation. Those filleting bastards serving the government mandates. It's evil is what it is. It's even more likely we're seeing the same people vanish from two systems at once. Unlike the health insurance market, Service Corporation International CSI, America's largest provider of funeral services, cremations and cemeteries, has climbed over 109% since 2021, and the latest trend line shows a renewed climb into 2025. Here's the chart he's supplied with it to show the climb. Carriage Services, CSV, another major player in the death care industry, is up an eye-watering 163% since the new jab rollout started. If we were searching for the early warning signs of an iatrogenic catastrophe on a national scale, this is exactly what it would look like. And on it goes and on it goes, and I don't want to even continue reading because it's chilling and terrifying, but that is the reality, people. That is the reality. And then he talks about the sudden adult death syndrome. It was also swept under the carpet, by the way, which is terrifying that you would even do that. Here we get to the end. In conclusion, we who remain, live to fight another day. The unwanted duty falls to we, the fortunate, to bear witness, to speak when others are silent, and to ensure that the architects of this unfolding disaster are all finally run to ground and hung as high as Haman, after fair trials, of course. We must ensure that the slow motion iatrogenic catastrophe is neither memory hold nor mythologized. The truth will be the reckoning. I agree with him completely on that. Absolutely. But anyway, back to our ordinary programming, reading Flotsam and Jetsom. We were up to where she said, They'd invited this manager to their home. Jack Carr, his name was. He was quite a different sort of chap from Norman. For one thing, he was a gentleman. He'd been to a public school and a university. He was about 35, tall, not beefy like Norman, but slight. He had the sort of figure that looked lovely in evening dress, and he had crisply curling hair and a laughing look in his eyes. Just her type. She took to him at once. It was a treat, having someone you could talk about London to and the theatre. He was gay and easy. They mean cheerful and easy in the old English meaning of that, by the way. Although he very well might have been gay as well, in modern parlance. We'll find out, won't we? He made the sort of jokes you could understand. In a week or two, she felt more at home with him than she did with her husband after 2 years. There had always been something about Norman that she hadn't quite been able to get to the bottom of. Probably his need to control and be vicious to her. That's what it was about. Didn't like her to know who he really was. Didn't have the courage of his convictions or basic human decency. Had a lot to hide. He was crazy about her, of course, but he'd told her a lot about himself. But she had a funny feeling that there was something he kept from her. Not because he wanted to, but, well, you couldn't hardly explain it because it was so alien, you might say, that he couldn't put it into words. Later, when she knew Jack better, she mentioned it to him, and Jack said it was because he was country-born, even though he hadn't a drop of native blood in his veins. Something of the country had gone to the making of him, so that he wasn't white, really. He had an eastern streak in him. However hard he tried, he could never be quite English. I guess it's not really racism, because there is a kind of a culture shock when you're raised in Europe as opposed to being raised in other countries. Let us not forget their colonialist attitude to the world, the colonialist attitude that led to them being complicit with the COVID epoch, by the way. Let them all die so we can just have, our Guidestone, Georgia Guidestone predictions made manifest. Culling the population from 8 billion to, what did they want? 100,000? 100 million or something like that, but still a huge culling of the population. That they even thought of putting that into practice shows you what monsters they truly were and still are. No regrets and no conscience. The local Labour of Parliament came to my door. I said, "Get away from my gate. You're complicit in the wholesale genocide of my species." "Oh," he said, "really? I made a lot of money out of it. I'm okay." That man walks around and lives and breathes and looks at us with such condescension and evil. It just blows my mind. Blows my mind, people of Earth. They are not human, and they are living amongst us. And they are in politics, and they made those decisions. And they sought to destroy and control us. So yes, I'm looking forward to the eventual fair trials. I view that creature as evil and disgusting and awful as Mengele or Goebbels or Goering or Hitler in Nazi Germany. No different with that attitude, you understand. Right, where was I? Ah, yes. And however hard he tried, he could never be quite English. Just like that Member of Parliament, no matter how hard he tries, in my eyes will never be quite human ever again. He'll never be able to cleanse himself of that stain. She chatted away aloud in that empty house, for the two boys, the cook and the houseboy, were in their own quarters, and the sound of her voice ringing along the wooden floors, piercing the wooden walls, was like the uncanny, unhuman gibber of new wine fermenting in a vat. She spoke just as though Skelton were there, but so incoherently that, if he had been, he would have had difficulty in following the story she told. It did not take her long to discover that Jack Carr wanted her, cheerful but not gay. She was excited. She'd never been promiscuous, but in all those years she'd been on the stage, naturally there'd been episodes. You couldn't hardly have put up with being on tour month after month if you didn't have a bit of fun sometimes. Of course now she wasn't going to give in too easily. She didn't want to make herself cheap. But what with the life she led, she'd be a fool if she missed the chance. And as far as Norman was concerned, well, what the eye didn't see, the heart didn't grieve over. They understood one another all right, Jack and her. They knew it was bound to happen, sooner or later. It was only a matter of waiting for the opportunity, and the opportunity came. But then something happened that they hadn't bargained for. They fell madly in love with one another. If Mrs. Grange really had been telling the story to Skelton, it might have seemed as unlikely to him as it did to them. They were two very ordinary people. He, a jolly, good-natured, commonplace planter, and she, a small part actress, far from clever, not even very young, with nothing to recommend her but a neat figure and a prettyish face. What startled as a casual affair turned without warning into a devastating passion. And neither of them was of a texture to sustain its exorbitant compulsion. They longed to be with one another. They were restless and miserable apart. She'd been finding Norman a bore for some time, but she'd put up with him because he was her husband. And now he irritated her to frenzy because he stood between her and Jack. There was no question of their going off together. Jack Carr had nothing but a salary, and he couldn't throw up a job he'd been only too glad to get. It was difficult for them to meet. They had to run awful risks. Perhaps the chances they had to take, the obstacles they had to surmount, were fuel to their love. A year passed, and it was as overwhelming as at the beginning. It was a year of agony and bliss, fear and thrill. Then she discovered that she was pregnant. She had no doubt that Jack Carr was the father, and she was wildly happy. It was true, life was difficult, so difficult sometimes that she felt she just couldn't cope with it. But there'd be a baby, his baby, and that would make everything easy. She was going to Kuching for her confinement. It happened about then that Jack Carr had to go to Singapore on business and was to be away for several weeks. But he promised to get back before she left, and he said he'd send word by a native the moment he arrived. When at last the message came, she felt sick with the anguish of her joy. She had never wanted him so badly. "I hear that Jack is back," she told her husband at dinner. "I shall go over tomorrow morning and get the things he promised to bring me." "I wouldn't do that. He's pretty sure to drop in towards sundown, and he'll bring them himself." "I can't wait. I'm crazy to have them." "All right, have it your own way." She couldn't help talking about him. For some time now, they had seemed to have little to say to one another, Norman and she. But that night, in high spirits, she chatted away as she had done during the first months of their marriage. She always rose early at 6, and next morning she went down to the river and had a bathe. There was a little dent in the bank just there, with a tiny sandy beach, and it was delicious to splash about in the cool, transparent water. A kingfisher stood on the branch of a tree overhanging the pool, and its reflection was brilliantly blue in the water. Lovely. She had a cup of tea and then stepped into a dugout. A boy paddled her across the river. It took a good half-hour. As they got near, she scanned the bank. Jack knew she would come at the earliest opportunity. He must be on the lookout. Ah, there he was. The delicious pain in her heart was almost unbearable. He came down to the landing stage and helped her to get out of the boat. They walked hand in hand up the pathway, and when they were out of sight of the boy who had paddled her over and of prying eyes from the house, they stopped. He put his arms round her, and she yielded with ecstasy to his embrace. She clung to him. His mouth sought hers. In that kiss was all the agony of their separation and all the bliss of their reunion. The miracle of love transfused them so that they were unconscious of time and place. They were not human anymore, but two spirits united by a divine fire. No thought passed through their minds. No words issued from their lips. Suddenly there was a brutal shock, like a blow, and immediately, almost simultaneously, a deafening noise. Horrified, not understanding, she clung to Jack more tightly, and his grip on her was spasmodic, so that she gasped. Then she felt that he was bearing her over. Jack. She tried to hold him up. His weight was too great for her, and as he fell to the ground, she fell with him. Then she gave a great cry, for she felt a gush of heat, and his blood sputtered over her. She began to scream. A rough hand seized her and dragged her to her feet. It was Norman. She was distraught. She could not understand. Norman, what have you done? I've killed him. She stared at him stupidly. She pushed him aside. Jack, Jack, shut up. I'll go and get help. It was an accident. He walked quickly up the pathway. She fell to her knees and took Jack's head in her arms. Darling, she moaned. Oh, my darling. Norman came back with some coolies and they carried him up to the house. That night she had a miscarriage and was so ill that for days it looked as if she would die. When she recovered, she had the nervous tic that she'd had ever since. She expected that Norman would send her away, but he didn't. He had to keep her to allay suspicion. There was some talk among the natives, and after a while the district officer came up and asked a lot of questions. But the natives were frightened of Norman, and the D.O. could get nothing out of them. The Dyak boy who paddled her over had vanished. Excuse me. Norman said something had gone wrong with his gun. Jack was looking at it to see what was the matter and it went off. They bury people quickly in that country, and by the time they might have dug him up, there wouldn't have been much left to show that Norman's story wasn't true. The D.O. hadn't been satisfied. It all looks damned fishy to me, he said, but in the absence of any evidence, I suppose I must accept your version. She would have given anything to get away, but with that nervous affliction, she had no ghost of a chance any longer of earning a living. She had to stay or starve, and Norman had to keep her or hang. Nothing had happened since then, and now nothing ever would happen. The endless years, one after another, dragged out their weary length. Mrs. Grange on a sudden stopped talking. Her sharp ears had caught the sound of a footstep on the path, and she knew that Norman was back from his round. Her head twitching furiously, her hand agitated by that sinister, uncontrollable gesture. She looked in the untidy mess of her dressing table for her precious lipstick. She smeared it on her lips, and then, she didn't know why, on a freakish impulse, daubed it all over her nose till she looked like a red-nosed comedian in a music hall. She looked at herself in the glass and burst out laughing. "To hell with life!" she shouted. The end. Sometimes it's a bit like that, people, when you love people who play you false, when you live in a dying world, when you strive for just a bit of happiness, having your wild dance and wild clubs with wild people. A certain person sought to destroy even that. To hell with life. To hell with him. But it's a beautiful day. Life goes on, and as I've said, there's good people out in the world, and maybe I'll meet them one day. They'll come meet me, and we'll have our happy ever after. In spite of everything, maybe to spite everything. After all, what does the humanity excel at more but survival, hoping one day to reach thrival. Blessed be people of earth. Stay happy, stay wild, stay free. That's interesting. Won't click off. Right, what are we going to do? What shall we do? No. This will click it off.